love the second law of thermodynamics because, okay, not a physicist, but here's this joke, right? This is the Heisenberg joke. A cop stops a guy for speeding and he says, do you know how fast you're going? And the guy says, no, but I know where I am. And this is the problem with listening, that you can't know both at the same time, right? So if you look at market research people, real analysts can give you deep insights, right? You look at listening platforms who do a very good job at sort of algorithmically simulating, trying to say that, algorithmically simulating.
Algorithmically simulating.
Thank you, Tim, that was good. Very good, we'll do practice later.
Can you hashtag that?
Yeah. Insight. And it's fast, it's a beautiful thing that it's fast, but the difficult thing is that then you have all these little points in time, and so it's really hard to see what that big picture is, and that's kind of what that idea sparked.
I mean, Jody, part of that is, does this need a new role or a new type of researcher within the organization who can take all of this vast amount of data and pull it into something of meaning, something of insight, something of maybe collective intelligence?
So, what do we mean by collective intelligence? This is the first time in human history that we've actually had collective memory written down. And I know it's not politically correct, but I liken it to when Anne Frank was writing her diary in the attic. We look back on that, we saw what real people were saying. We're seeing what real people are saying now about Iran or earthquakes or airplane crashes. But that's just collective memory. For it to become a collective intelligence, we need to process it in certain ways. And what's extraordinary is, 2 or 3 years ago, we did not have the computing power or the speed to be able to process 10,000 or 100,000 posts a second, which is where this stream is going to end up. So if we can process those posts very rapidly, we will turn the memory into an intelligence. And intelligence means community, location, gender, people relationships, links. And we will take it from being that thing that annoys us most about the stream is that it's less than 1% goodness, but it's 100% real. It's real people. And if we analyze it correctly, in half a second, we'll be able to take that 100% real and turn it into the 1% goodness that you guys want.
Well, the other thing that's really important is a fabulous definition of crowdsourcing or collective intelligence. I forget who said it, but it goes something like this. Finding the needle in the haystack is a lot easier when the hay helps you look. And I think there's a really interesting opportunity not just to listen, but also to speak in a way that evokes response that you can then listen to. And I think that's a really important next phase too.
All right. Well, speaking of collective intelligence, let's open it up to questions. Nat?
So one of the things that we're seeing in some of the community managers that we're working with in some of the brands I'm working with, we'd love to see a tab that says insights. We'd love to see a tab that says recommendations. And we'd love to see this spitting out communities, okay, like giving birth. Because this is a midwife. This tool is a midwife. There's a kind of conception that can take place in the guts of this, and it can be giving birth to communities that are populated by key influencers and by content that has value to brands. And we've actually, in Europe, been selling these children of People Browser to the brands. They're selling.
Are you asking? Are you saying that?
I'm asking for a tab that says insights there, and I'm wondering when that's possible.
So he's asking, for those who can't hear him, if it's possible to have a tab in addition to the other things that we're pulling together, insights, or that 1%, I imagine. What do you think, Joe?
I want you to define what an insight is, but I also want to respond to what you were saying about community. What's really cool about community right now is that people are not opting into communities. What they're doing is they're telling us who they are in their bio and their profile, and we're building the communities on the fly by reference to those bios and profiles. That's the really cool thing, because we may think of a new community tonight as a group, and maybe people have used the hashtag from this evening or from today, and we can build a community out of the people who've used that hashtag to then track them. Now, can you tell us what you mean by insight?
So in other words, we've got a huge, like you've got in the People Browser deck, 10,000 tweets reduced to 880 meaningful mentions, right? That's one of your slides. what would it be like to take those 180 meaningful mentions across the board and get 25 insights about a topic or an interest for the brand, right?
And how do you filter it from the 800 down to the 20?
That's my question for you, man. I mean, when are we going to get the artificial intelligence to do this for us?
You know, just remember, one of the big secrets of modern AI is that the human is still the last mile. And there really are opportunities to take these tools and then do that synthetic insight on top of it. But it does take some additional effort. You know, the idea that somehow it will be all automated is wrong. You know, if that were the case, you know, kind of going back to the search era, you know, Google's "I'm feeling lucky" button would have been the one that everybody used. Instead, you got the view where you get 10 results and you are the last mile. You pick which of those results you want. And that insight, that all you have to do is get in the region where it's possible to apply your own intelligence a little more effectively, is, I think, really important.
And so the last mile for all of those who are live tweeting this, you can share with all of your social media expert friends that they have hope that they will have employment if they can connect that last mile. Shannon, I saw your hand earlier.
Yeah, something that any client I work with, I've always started with is that you first have to figure out where the conversations that are happening around your industry are. And it seems to me that we're talking about them as if they only occur on Twitter, and they don't. If you're an airline, you need to watch Flyer Talk. You need to watch certain things. If you're O'Reilly, you need to watch the Stack Overflows, the Hacker News for the conversations that are happening there, the maker communities that are not happening just on or only on or even on at all Twitter. So I'm curious how the tools you're building or the tools that you're working with your clients help you find where those conversations are happening before you then start listening to those conversations.
So I think that question is, how do we integrate other networks into
Well,
into
how
the
do you
product?
discover those networks? How do you pay attention to them? Because there are networks out there, but they're not all on Twitter.
I think the first thing we have to do is plug the other networks in, which we have actually done at a server level. We're now receiving every blog and every forum post. And then we have to apply the same analytics that we applied to Twitter. We haven't done it yet because we've not wanted to overload the UI, the interface. The biggest issue for us now is actually how do we present this information in a way that doesn't overload the UI. We've got the hardware to analyze 100,000 posts a second and to build all the relationships. And we've got the server technology to do that. But the real issue is how do we show variable bits of data. Twitter is so beautiful because it's 140 characters. And so we're trying to solve that UI problem at the moment.
But I have to say, I'm not sure it's entirely a software problem. I know when I'm trying to figure something out, I find a couple of interesting people, and then I ask them, hey, where do you guys hang out? You know?
Yeah.
And it might be on an IRC channel, it might be, is it on some site? You know, fact is, all you do, you got to find somebody who looks like they're a representative member, and then start talking with them. And so one of the things that I think you can do with Twitter is sometimes you can find somebody who will then be able to point you to those other communities and places.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, and this is definitely the last mile is people. I mean, one other example, and I with respect, I don't think People Browser or any software company will ever be able to do this fully, because different communities of affinity will have different places where they go, and there will be different native behavior and different social behavior that will govern which channels they use. And of course, technology being the way that it does, it's always going to change. So as a quick example, back to fashion, since it's on my brain today, the top 1,000 blogs in Tumblr, 180 are fashion related. And you think about it for a second, and you can understand why, right? It's an incredible passion, area, and it's also highly visual, and it's also highly shareable. Now, would that translate, as Tumblr becomes more mature to other industries? I don't know. But the onus is on the people who understand the business to figure out what that behavior is, what the sharing behavior is.
Hi, I had a question about something that most people don't like talking about, but monetizing social media. Some of the actions that are out there to be able to monetize by postings or by sponsorships, because not everyone's gonna wanna follow, say, Kraft or some other product, but they wanna still be able to let people know that we're 100% whole wheat, or that PG&E are now doing new things, and they want to let people know, and that is a way for them as revenue, but also other ways of other smaller companies or other companies to be able to generate revenue. What are some of the things that you guys have been using to kind of let these larger brands go, okay, here's where the people are, this is what they're talking about, here's some things to fix, here's some things to be aware of, by the way, here's an opportunity to make money by, and then what are some of the ways they're doing that?
I mean, how does the brand make money? Or how does the social
Based
media-
on the intelligence that you gather.
Yeah, so like one way to kind of think about it is that just in general, how are they making money? But I would see that most of, and I have a client that actually uses your system, is that to be able to gain a lot of information from you to make a decision to be able to have some type of
Additional
marketing
monetization.
implementation or marketing outreach or social media outreach, but then what are some of the ways that
So
your
most,
clients make money?
most of our revenue doesn't come from what you actually see on our website. What our revenue comes from a brand who says, I'd like to spend $100,000 finding who the VIP influencers are, and I'd like to work with them to make sure that they completely understand the product and encourage their friends to use us. Or they may just say, you know, we would like to have a custom analytics platform that goes across all networks, you know, and we charge them quite a lot of money to build custom platforms. That's what pays the bills, and this is how we can afford our lovely new office. Where I'd love to see this when we speak to you guys in a couple of years is I'd love to have 100,000 people all paying $9 a month for really intelligent search. And that's the exciting part. I don't know how I sort of know how we get there. We're trying to get there quickly, but I think it's going to take us a while.
Well,
Will people pay for intelligent search?
Yeah, I think it's a smart question about how people make money with social media. But I will say that smart companies ultimately make money by being useful to their customers. You know, if you're Kraft, you know, people buy your product because it's worth something to them. You know, they go, oh yeah, I mean, again, Kraft is a little, you know, kind of funky, but you know, I'm not a consumer goods guy, but I assume, you know, somebody says, oh yeah, I really like it, I get that packaged cheese slice, you know, or whatever, or
Well, it's being able to say that, okay, so Velveeta now comes in a PBR flavored cheese stick.
But, you know,
And then for them to be able to say, okay, hey, check this out, and the hipsters over at Dolores Beach basically says, this is awesome, I want to buy it now. And then to be able to
Yeah, I
assign
think
some type
that
of
idea
encouragement
that
for
it's
purchase.
this sort of stimulus response thing with, you know, a bunch of Pavlov dogs consumers is just, to me, not the right way to think about it.
But people do though. That's, I mean, a lot of these companies want to be able to make money, and that's how they do show value, is being able to say from marketing or whatever initiative
Yeah.
it is, how much money did you bring in though?
So some of where this is happening right now is actually in web analytics, right? Because web analytics companies are looking off domain and Facebook in particular to see what influence does Facebook actually have on a sale or a conversion, right? A conversion just being an affirmative action like downloading a white paper or, I don't know, registering for something. So just as an example, since we're on Kraft, Oreo has, last time I checked, 15 million Facebook fans. 15 million Facebook fans.
I don't understand what is wrong with people. Can anyone
And you know
explain
what
to
they
me
do?
why you would follow Oreo?
They ask questions like, what's
Come on,
your
they got your
favorite?
colors.
Perfect.
Have you ever
I'm a
traveled to the
consumer.
Midwest?
No, it's kind of a bad example, so let me switch to something from higher education that I happen to know, which is that there's a university in New Jersey, and what they do is they were looking at their Facebook activity, and they kind of concluded they didn't have that many fans, and there was sort of, you know, some stuff going on around basketball games, but it wasn't that big a deal. But then they used impression attribution, which is a web analytics, you know, or marketing optimization capability. And basically what that told them was, well, that may be true, but the people who come to Facebook are like 17 times more likely to actually do something affirmative with your company. And by the way, they spend a whole hell of a lot of time there. So that stuff is still pretty much in its infancy. Some of those platforms have it, but the ability to connect that with what People Browser does, with what other platforms platforms too. I mean, that's kind of where the magic is.
So we are running out of time, and we are going to be here to answer your questions for a little bit. I know that I'm parched, and I saw some wine upstairs. I will say a couple of things. One is, to answer your question in a few words, is I've worked with one of the larger publishers in the United States to answer that question about how they can start to sell new advertising products with the intelligence that they can find within these networks. And some really interesting answers came out of that process. The second thing out of three that I will say is that if they were to make PBR flavored cheese sticks, I bet you it would be more than a can of PBR. And then 2 or 3, I want to thank you, Jody, Tim, Susan, very much for coming together and helping us out with a great panel. Thank you, Jody.